So when we begin Act Two, we're kind of in this place with Macbeth where we're not exactly sure what he's going to end up doing. I mean, when we last saw him at the end of Act One, he was wavering. I have no spur to prick the sides of my intent, but only vaulting ambition, right? So he's like gone back and forth. But at the end of scene 7, in comes Lady Macbeth, and she, we think, has kind of convinced him, put this night's great business into my dispatch, that sort of thing. And so she's kind of, I don't want to say tricked, but she's kind of manipulated him into saying, like, when you said this, then you were a man. And so, we get the idea that at the end of Act 1, that she's kind of convinced him. But quite frankly, like, there's still some doubt as to whether or not that could actually occur. So when we begin Act 2, there's still a little bit of question in our minds. Like, is this murder actually going to happen? Is he going to have second thoughts? Is he going to change his mind? Act 2 doesn't begin with the Macbeths, though. Act 2 begins with Banquo. We see Banquo alone. He's keeping guard. His son is with him, Fleance. And it's an interesting choice on Shakespeare's part to actually begin the second act of the play, again, not with Macbeth, but with Banquo. And we have to stop and we have to think about what Banquo represents for us. Remember that Banquo is honorable. Banquo does not necessarily believe that what the witches say is true. Remember, when he hears of their predictions, he says, "What? Can the devil speak true?" And so we get this idea that perhaps Banquo is a voice of reason for us, for lack of a better term. That perhaps Banquo is this last vestige of honor and nobility and morality left in the play. He has this wonderful little interaction with his son. He asks, "What is the time?" And Fleance responds that the clock struck 12. Now, here's what's great about that, right? Because not only if it struck 12, it's midnight. Well, midnight was also known as the witching hour. And so we know that in this moment in time, that it was believed that this was kind of where the veil between our world and the other world dropped for a little bit. And so there's certainly that connection back to the supernatural that we just love. He talks about the stars and the moon. He says there's husbandry in heaven. Their candles are all out, that there's no light in heaven. The stars are all gone. We can take this as both figurative and literal. Literally, it means that it's a dark night. It's very hard to see. Remember, hover through the fog and fill the air. Visibility is going to be part of a thing. But we also know that in the Christian tradition, that light represents God. And so the idea that God is absent from tonight, that perhaps he doesn't want to see what is about to happen, that perhaps Macbeth is committing this act or will commit this act without God's blessing. And so there's some very interesting things that go on there. Macbeth enters the scene somewhat quietly, and Banquo was very suspicious of him. He says, "Give me my sword," and then he turns and he says, "Who's there?" And Macbeth, of course, replies, "A friend." And you'll see in the movie version, I just love it when he says "a friend," and then he turns around and he's like holding a dagger out, like, "A friend who's ready to stab you." I find that funny because I'm an English teacher, so there you go. Shakespeare very deliberately has Banquo be the last person that Macbeth really interacts with before he goes to commit the murder of Duncan. And I think that we have to acknowledge that for a couple of reasons. One, Banquo is kind of that last model of morality, that last time for Macbeth to realize what exactly he has done or what exactly he is ready to do. And so there's certainly that to begin looking at. Secondly, Banquo has also had predictions given to him. and yet he is not acting on them. And so we have to begin to wonder about Macbeth's character. What is it about Macbeth that is different than Banquo? What is it that causes Macbeth to really begin to think about committing this act to make the witch's predictions come true? Is it ambition? Has he been predestined by fate? Is it the influence of the witches? Okay. And that's kind of where we go once we have Macbeth's second great soliloquy of the play. In this soliloquy, he stands outside of Duncan's chamber, and we begin to see Macbeth's mind begin to ramble just a bit. As he stands there, he says, "Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle towards my hand? Come, let me clutch thee. I have thee not, and yet I see thee still." He's beginning to hallucinate here, girls. The dagger isn't real. The dagger that he sees floating in front of him, the handle outstretched as if it is inviting him, welcoming him to grab it. Where did that come from? And we have to begin to think then, is he actually hallucinating? Is his sanity beginning to crack? Or has it been sent by the witches? Is this actually a dagger, a floating dagger that they've sent to him? He says that marshalleth me on my way, that guides me the way that I'm going. We have to wonder, again, has his mind created this? Or is this the witches? Now, as you read, okay, and you look through this soliloquy, a few things to note. One, personification is used really throughout this entire soliloquy. 11 different objects are personified, or objects or abstract ideas end up being personified. Secondly, we have to begin to look at the dagger as a symbol. What is it a symbol for? What could it be a symbol for? And lastly, we have to begin to look at Macbeth's mental state. And what can we tell from the diction that's being used and the syntax that's being employed that kind of reveals to us his mental state at this moment? Now you're going to stop watching me explain everything, and you're going to jump over to YouTube, and you're actually going to watch Ian McKellen deliver this soliloquy. And one of the reasons why I really love his performance is you can kind of see the cracking of his mind as he delivers it. So pay careful attention to that. After you have watched the film version, then your sub will tell you what to do from there. So enjoy, girls.